Imagine a world where words hold the power to shape reality, and translations wield the ability to alter the very fabric of belief. This is not a dystopian science fiction. It is the history of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. For centuries, this ancient text has been a cornerstone of religious and cultural identity, influencing not just the way people understood their scriptures, but also the way they lived their lives. The Septuagint is a testament to the profound impact that translation can have, often in ways that we might not immediately recognize. The story of the Septuagint begins in the 3rd century BCE, in the bustling, cosmopolitan city of Alexandria, Egypt. At this time, the Hellenistic world was a melting pot of cultures, where Greek was the lingua franca. The Jewish community in Alexandria, one of the largest and most influential of its time, faced a challenge. Many Jews could no longer read Hebrew fluently. To bridge this gap, a group of scholars embarked on a monumental task: to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek. This translation, known as the Septuagint, became a vital link between the ancient Hebrew texts and the Hellenistic world. The Septuagint was not just a straightforward translation. It was a living document that evolved over time. One of the most significant aspects of this evolution was the way it sometimes deliberately altered the sense of the Hebrew text. This was not always a matter of mistranslation or error. Often, it was a conscious decision to produce a theologically more satisfying version. For instance, the Hebrew Bible is notably reticent about the concept of life after death, often portraying the afterlife as a shadowy and mysterious realm called Sheol, where the praise of God ceases and the faithful can no longer enjoy fellowship with Him. In contrast, the Septuagint sometimes introduces resurrection language where the Hebrew text is silent. Consider Psalm chapter 16, verses 9 to 10, where the Hebrew speaks of God saving the suppliant from untimely death. You do not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. In the Greek version, however, this is interpreted as a promise of resurrection. You will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption. This subtle but significant change transforms the psalm from a prayer for deliverance from death to a declaration of hope in the afterlife. This particular verse is famously quoted in Acts chapter 2, verses 31, where it is applied to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, illustrating how the Septuagint shaped early Christian theology. Another example is found in Psalm chapter 1, verses 5, where the Hebrew text states that the ungodly will not stand in the judgment. This means they will not be able to stand up in court and be judged as righteous. However, the Greek version translates stand as rise from the dead, anastasontai, giving the verse a completely different meaning. It suggests that the ungodly will not rise to take part in the council of the righteous in the afterlife. This shift in meaning aligns the psalm with Christian beliefs about the final judgment and the resurrection of the dead. These changes in the Septuagint were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader trend. The translators often adapted the text to fit the theological and cultural context of the Hellenistic world. This was not necessarily a problem for the early readers, who were not familiar with the Hebrew text and saw the Septuagint as their authoritative scripture. For Greek-speaking Jews and Christians, the Septuagint was the Bible. However, the differences between the Hebrew and Greek texts did not go unnoticed. As the Jewish and Christian communities diverged, the Septuagint became a point of contention. By the 1st century CE, when Christianity began to take shape, Jews started to suspect that Christians had tampered with the Septuagint to support their beliefs. This led to several attempts to revise the translation and bring it closer to the Hebrew original. Three notable scholars, Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion, produced their own versions of the Septuagint, each with a different approach to translation. Aquila's version, for instance, was extremely literal, sometimes to the point of being barely comprehensible, while Symmachus produced a more stylistic and readable Greek text. These revisions were recorded by Origen in his Hexapla, a massive work that aligned the Hebrew text with various Greek translations. Despite these revisions, the Septuagint remained the primary text for Greek-speaking Christians. It was used in liturgy, study, and daily life, and its influence extended beyond the religious sphere. The Septuagint played a crucial role in the development of the Greek language and literature, contributing to the rich cultural heritage of the Hellenistic world. As the Septuagint expanded to include other books, it incorporated texts that had never existed in Hebrew, such as the Wisdom of Solomon, and others whose Hebrew originals were lost, like Sirach and Tobit. These books, known as the Apocrypha, were widely accepted as scripture by early Christians, and were included in the Christian Bible. However, they were later rejected by Protestant reformers, who returned to the Hebrew canon as their primary source. The impact of the Septuagint was not limited to the Greek-speaking world. In Palestine and the Eastern diaspora, where Aramaic was the primary language, Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Bible, known as targums, began to appear around the same time. These targums, like the Septuagint, were not always literal translations. They often expanded on the Hebrew text, adding explanations, elaborations, and even contradictions. For example, in Isaiah chapter 19, verses 24 to 5, where the Hebrew text speaks of a future time when Israel will be a blessing alongside Egypt and Assyria, the Targumist reinterpreted this to mean that the Israelites living in Egypt and Assyria will triumph when those nations fight each other. This reflects the Targumist's desire to align the text with the concerns and perspectives of the Jewish community. Targums, like the Septuagint, played a crucial role in preserving and transmitting the Hebrew Bible. They were used in synagogues and were an integral part of Jewish education. Targum Onkelos, a rendering of the Pentateuch, became the official version by the 3rd century CE, while Targum Jonathan covered the prophetic books. These Targums, along with the Septuagint, ensured that the Hebrew Bible remained accessible to communities that no longer spoke Hebrew fluently. As the Roman Empire expanded, Latin became the dominant language in the western part of the Mediterranean. This led to the need for a Latin translation of the Bible. The first Latin translations, known as the Vetus Latina, began to appear in the late 1st century CE, particularly in North Africa. These translations, like the Septuagint, were made from the Greek text rather than the Hebrew. The Vetus Latina was not a single, uniform translation, but a collection of texts that varied in style and accuracy. The Codex Bezae, a 5th century manuscript, is one of the best witnesses to the Vetus Latina and provides valuable insights into the early Latin translations of the Bible. The most influential Latin translation, however, was the Vulgate, produced by Jerome in the late 4th century CE. Jerome, a learned scholar, recognized the need for a more accurate and reliable translation. Unlike the earlier Latin translations, the Vulgate was based on the Hebrew text of the Old Testament and the Greek text of the New Testament. This approach gave the Vulgate a greater fidelity to the original languages, making it the standard Bible for the Western Church for over 1,000 years. The Septuagint, targums, and Latin translations collectively illustrate the complex and dynamic nature of biblical transmission. Each translation reflects the cultural, theological, and linguistic context of its time. The Septuagint, with its deliberate alterations and theological adaptations, shaped the way people understood the Hebrew Bible and laid the groundwork for early Christian theology. The Targums, with their expansions and elaborations, preserved the Hebrew Bible for Aramaic-speaking communities and enriched Jewish interpretive traditions. The Latin translations, particularly the Vulgate, ensured that the Bible remained accessible and relevant in the changing linguistic landscape of the Roman Empire. In the end, the Septuagint, targums, and Latin translations are more than just historical curiosities. They are living documents that continue to influence religious and cultural practices today. They remind us that translation is not a neutral act, but a creative and interpretive process that can shape the very words we hold sacred. Whether we realize it or not, the translations we use are not just reflections of the original texts, but also products of the contexts in which they were created. The Septuagint, in particular, stands as a testament to the power of translation to transform and shape our understanding of the divine. In a world where words hold such power, the Septuagint is a reminder that the way we read and interpret our scriptures is as much a product of our own context as it is of the texts themselves.